Have you ever watched a movie and when it ends, you feel exhausted? Or have you read a book and got to the end and then thought, but what happened to XYZ? Today, I want to talk about something that trips up so many writers, especially newer writers, and that is the pacing of your story. More specifically, I want to talk about why having action on every page isn't necessarily a good thing, why readers actually need moments to breathe, and how you can make your story flow naturally from chapter to chapter while still keeping people turning the pages. Because here's the thing, pacing isn't about making your story faster, it's about making it feel right, helping it flow. A lot of writers, and I completely understand why, think that if there isn't something dramatic happening all the time, the reader's just going to get bored. So they end up writing stories where something explodes in chapter 1, or someone's running for their life in chapter 2. And then there's this huge confrontation in chapter 3. And it just keeps going. There's no pause. There's no chance to take a breath. And there's no quiet space for the reader to absorb what's actually going on. And the funny thing is it is that kind of story that can make the reader feel exhausted rather than excited. If you think about it like this, have you ever sort of like been to a movie or something and you've watched this film where there's explosions and car chases and shouting and fighting and emotional breakdowns every single minute? You don't actually come out of the cinema saying, well, that was amazing. You'd be more inclined to come out of it and sort of say, well, yeah, that was a lot. Readers are exactly the same. They don't want just the action. They want the contrast. Pacing is about rhythm. You have fast moments and slow moments, high tension and low tension, action and reflection. Those quieter moments in a story aren't filler. They're not wasted space. That's where the reader gets to process just what happened. It's where characters react. It's where relationships between the characters deepens. It's where the emotions land in your story. If you have something dramatic happen, like a betrayal, a death, or a big reveal, and then you immediately rush into the next big dramatic moment without letting that sink in, you're robbing the reader of the emotional impact. Readers need the time to feel. They want to sit with a character when they're confused or angry, relieved, heartbroken, or terrified. That's how a reader will bond with your characters. And that bond is what keeps them reading far more than action alone will. So if you're worried that your story feels slow because you've given your characters those times to think, talk, or breathe, that's not a flaw. That's good storytelling. Now, this doesn't mean you should have chapters where nothing happens at all. Your quiet scenes still need to do something, but those do somethings might be a little bit more subtle. They are the chapters where you can develop your character, where you can advance a relationship, where you can reveal information, and you can show the consequences of the action scenes that you've already written. You're wanting to plant seeds for future conflict in those quiet times. And this is why a scene where two characters talking over breakfast can be just as important as the sword fight. If that conversation changes how those two characters see each other or sets up a potential new problem, the key is the intention. This is where you have to differentiate. If a scene exists only because you didn't know what else to do, then it will feel flat. But if it exists to serve the story, even if it's quiet, it can still pull the reader along. And this is what brings me nicely to flow. I have a huge thing, like in my head, when I'm writing about the flow of a story. A story that flows well feels effortless to read. One chapter ends, the next one begins, and before you know it, as a reader, it's midnight, and you've told yourself 3 times that you'll go to bed after just one more chapter. This doesn't happen by accident. Flow comes from that logical progression where every chapter feels like a natural consequence of the one before. Something happens, something causes a reaction. That reaction leads to a decision. That decision leads to the next problem. And in chapters where the characters do something, their events feel disconnected, your readers can feel it, even if they can't explain why. And it said, like, for example, I write dual POV. So I have 2 different viewpoints in my story from the start. So, but I try and look at them a bit like a braid, where they just go round, they interact with each other. And then the third strand of your plait is the plot. And the characters move around it. But with each turn, each twist, each crossover, you're getting a depth of relationships. You're getting growth. You're helping the reader learn more about the characters. So instead of, if you get yourself at a point in your manuscript where you're saying, well, I need something exciting to happen here, don't think about that. Just think about what would naturally happen as a result of what you've already written. And that one question can fix a lot of pacing and flow issues that I see in some stories. Chapter endings are really important because this is where you're encouraging the reader to keep turning the page. So you do need like a hook, for example, but a hook doesn't have to mean a shocking cliffhanger at the end of every chapter. If every chapter you have ends with someone screaming or a gunshot or a door flying open or a dramatic, oh no moment, it stops being exciting and starts being predictable. A good hook is really just an unanswered question. It could be a big deal. Will they survive? Who betrayed them? Or it might be just one of those small things like, why did he say that? What did she mean by that look? What choice will they make? Sometimes the best hooks are emotional rather than explosive. And ending a chapter with a character realizing something uncomfortable or making a decision they're not ready for can be far more compelling than another, oh no, or a burst through the door. Another issue that I have seen in some stories is that some writers find it really hard to trust their readers, and they worry that if everything's not spelled out, or that the author hasn't kept the tension dialed up to maximum at all times, that the reader will just wander off. But readers like to lean in. They like the subtext. They like the anticipation. They like that slow build. And if you let a moment breathe, if you allow a chapter to end quietly but meaningfully, you're inviting the reader to think. And when readers think about your story when they're not actively reading about it, that is a really good sign. Now, that's not to say that pacing is the same for every niche or genre. A cozy mystery is paced very different to a thriller. A character-driven romance, like the stories I write, would move very differently to an epic fantasy. And even within the same genre, 2 books can have very different rhythms, and they both work beautifully. But rather than ask, is my story fast enough? Think instead of, is my story paced appropriately for the kind of story I'm telling? If your book is about relationships, emotions, and personal growth, then it needs space. There needs to be chapters for this growth and those emotions to unfold. If it is about danger and survival, then of course the pace is going to be tighter. But even then, readers still need moments of calm. This means that when the danger returns, it feels more real. So if you're in the process of writing a book, or you have written a couple and you think this might be an issue, have a look at your chapters and ask yourself, where does the tension rise? Where does it fall? And where have I given the reader a moment to recover? You're looking at it like that. I'm sure you've all seen, if you're authors, you've all seen those things where you've got like that build up to the first thing and then there's a bit down. This is your quiet time. Then it builds up a bit higher and then there's that bit down. And again, this is where the reader recovers. And then you build up to the climax and then they come down and you get the happy ever after, or whatever it is your end result is, and it all quietly skates off from there to the end. But if every chapter was high, 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 you need more variation. And if everything is meh, 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 then maybe you do need to raise the stakes in a few key places. 2 or 3 times is enough just to give the rest of it that contrast. Think of pacing like music. It has loud sections and quiet sections. It's the contrast that makes it really satisfying. So if you take nothing else from this little video today, understand this. You don't need action on every page to keep a reader engaged. You do need meaning, flow, and emotional connection. So a little insert here. This also doesn't mean that you do pages and pages of info dump about your world building simply because you spent 2 years doing it and you just really want to cram those thoughts into a book. No. What's going to keep your reader engaged is what your characters are doing. And your characters' lives, their lives need to have meaning. They need to have flow, and there needs to be emotional connections. You need to let your story breathe, let your characters react, and let the chapters lead naturally one into the other. When you respect the rhythm of your story and you trust the reader to come along for the ride, you'll often find that people won't keep reading, just keep reading. They won't be able to stop. So, what do you think? Is this an issue? Do you think I'm talking bullshit? And is there a particular writing topic you'd like me to cover next? Because I'm always open to suggestions. I post long form content on Mondays and Thursdays with relating to writers. And I've also started posting chapters, author reading chapters on Saturdays. That's for my readers, because some of my readers follow this channel, and also to help boost my watch time, because otherwise I'm never going to get monetized. But still, I do answer every comment, and I really do love hearing from you. So if you've got suggestions or you want to argue with me or anything else at all, please put it in the comments below and I will respond. But basically, until then, please keep writing, my friends. Have some fun with it. Until next time, we'll see you then. Bye.